Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi al-Tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to the course on From Ali to Al-Mahdi, the course on Imamah, and this is the fourth session of the course. And now finally I can announce and give you the good news that we've now moved on from the foundations and going into the topic of Imamah itself. So we're diving into Imamah. We've geared ourselves properly in the last three sessions, and now we're with Shaykh Kazim once again, but this time from a new perspective. Okay, so we're with Shaykh Kazim to discuss Imamah itself, and we're going to get started the whole journey of Imamah by using the intellect. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Kazim. Thank you very much for being with us once again and benefit from you. So the intellect, what can the intellect tell us about Imamah?
Okay, so A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As you mentioned, that finally we have reached the point where now we can actually talk about Imam. So what we want to do in this session is to try and answer some questions or parts of a single question, and we'll come to the details regarding Imamah. But before we do that, we need to very briefly and casually define what we mean by Imam, because that's a technical and a logical way of proceeding, right? You have a topic at hand and you want to discuss it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first thing you do is that, okay, what are you discussing? Should be. Although I don't need to define Imamah in all its details and all the baggage it comes with, because it's actually going to happen through the course. Okay. So the sessions that will follow will actually give the audience a more detailed understanding of Imam. But just as Shias, we have certain understanding of Imamah. So basically, you're talking about some kind of a divine leadership position continuing after the Holy Prophet of Islam. So this is the idea, right? And we say, so we have 12 Imams, starting from Imam Ali Amirul Mu'mineen to Imam al-Mahdi. So that's the name of the course. So we know that you're talking about these personalities, their role and the function they had in so many different ways. We might not have a very clear understanding of what their role and function is, but yet we know it's something important, something prominent.
But we can say that the least we're talking about here is Imamah in the sense of a divine position.
Exactly.
A position given by the divine, not a position given by people. So we're not talking about a khilafah, we're not talking about political leadership only, right?
Exactly. So we start from here that we're talking about a certain divine position. So just to push us into the discussion, I'll just read, for example, how Shaykh Mufid defines Imam. So in one of his books called Awailul Maqalat, he says, so he's describing who the A'imma are. So he says, Innal A'immata al-Qa'imina maqam al-Anbiya. So basically, look how he's a scholar who's close to the period of Ghaiba, and we're trying to see that what his understanding was. Of course, we're not going into the details of how different people have defined Imamah, just to get us started. So he says that the Imams are in some ways doing things similar to what the prophets will do. So it's kind of a continuation of that divine role. So the prophets, we know for sure, they were on a divine mission. They're divine leaders. They're appointed by God. So he's saying that, look, the Imams have a similar position. In what sense? He says, في تنفيذ الأحكام وإقامة الحدود وحفظ الشرائع وتأديب الأنام. So he defines these four functions. He said that in order to implement Allah's laws, to put into practice his hudud, means the penal laws, the codes that Allah has given for running the society. وَحِفْظِ الشَّرَائِعِ, to protect the Sharia and religion. وَتَأْدِيبِ الْأَنَامِ, to do tarbiyah and tazkiyah of the people. So look, it's a divine position with a role roughly like this. And then he describes one of their sifat, مَعْصُومِينَ كَإِسْمَةِ الْأَنْبِيَا. So in this very brief sentence, he's given us a lot of meaning and information that, look, we're talking about something like this. Of course, we haven't established, and the whole purpose of this course is to say that, do we have such a position? Who are they? So that's the discussion we're going to have. But it's good to have some definition. So to summarize this, when you go and look in the books of Kalam, theology, Shia theology, they described Imamah in just one line. They said, Riyasatun ammatun fid dini wa dunya. So it's like it gives a broad definition. Says that it's a very general riyasa, leadership, in matters of deen and dunya. So it's trying to combine deen, means spiritual guidance and those kind of things, and dunya, so that socio-political aspect. So, but we're starting with a very vague and general idea, and then we'll narrow down to that specific meaning of imamah, and in the process would even establish that such a position is actually needed. Yes.
So can I say that seeing that it's basically the role that the Prophet had, obviously they're not prophets, and that is a clear thing. We're not claiming prophethood for anybody, but we're claiming that there is a need for this prophetic mission to continue at the hands of people who are prophet-like.
Exactly.
And so can we say that the intellect is the one that prompts this thought in our minds and pushes us towards this research? Because why would we go and look for such a position? Why should we be thinking about, is there something after the Prophet or not? It seems to me like the intellect is sort of pushing us towards that. Look, just like we have prophets, we need people like prophets to continue this, and the intellect is the one pushing us for this.
So exactly, you made a very good point that prophets played a certain function in society, a certain divine function. And we know for sure as Muslims, and you can discuss in detail about that the Holy Prophet of Islam is the Khatamul Anbiya, is the Khatamul Nabiyyin. The prophethood ends there. So there are no more prophets after him. This is something which we all agree. Of course, if you want to go into all the details about it, we have a course on our online learning platform that talks about Nubuwa in general and all these details. But that's something that we all can take as something which we all agree upon that. So now this question comes that, okay, he's the last prophet and he played a very important function, and I'll come to that. What was the role of the Holy Prophet of Islam and the prophets in general, the Anbiya in general? So this question automatically comes that what happens to this role and function after the Holy Prophet? And it's a significant question, and this gets us started on using our intellect to try and work out some details of this idea of divine guidance, leadership, divine position continuing after the Holy Prophet. So, and that's the approach that we are going to take, that we're going to use intellect to work out some of the details related to Imamah. So, before we dive into the arguments, just want to mention two things, and then we'll be ready to go into the details.
Okay.
So one thing is that definitely we're not going through all the arguments that are there, intellectual arguments, to approach the idea of Imam. There are many arguments.
We'll select a few.
We will select two. These have been selected for a variety of reasons. One is that because it suits our audience the best, and probably it's something which we will be able to appreciate it and see the relevance of this idea of Imamah very, very clearly. Okay. And we're going to turn these into very logical arguments and derive the conclusions that we have. And just to give you an idea, for example, I'm carrying this book today and I'm going to read some parts of it. So, for example, it's called, it's in Persian, it's called Imamat wa Wilaya. So it's a book on Imamah and Wilaya. It's good. So let me even show you some of the things here. So this has good 6 volumes of discussion on Imamah. And the first 3 volumes are approaching Imamah from an intellectual perspective. So 3 volumes of discussion talking about different arguments that we have, and we've just chosen 2 of these. I'm just trying to show that there's a lot to be discussed about Imamah, even from an intellectual perspective. And the 3 other volumes are to do with the Imamah in the Quran only. So imagine 3 plus 3, 6, and we haven't even reached the Ahadith. And if you want to go into the discussion of Imamah in Ahadith,
then that's a whole
probably need 6 more volumes to complete the discussion on Imamah. So I'll be using this book, parts of it. So we'll present the argument. Then, as I mentioned before, that sometimes the Imams themselves have used intellectual arguments. So I'll present the argument. And when the argument is presented, we'll get the conclusion. But I also want to show you that, look, this same argument or the same points which we're discussing and our intellect can understand, the Imams would use the same points to convince the questioners or the people who had questions. So that's going to be interesting. And there's so much that Imams have spoken about Imamah from an intellectual perspective that we'll just be scratching the surface, just giving a few examples. And really, it would be interesting to go through all of these narrations. And right, of course, we wouldn't have the time. So that's point number one before we start the argument. So in addition to the first point, let me add another point here. And that is that before we dive into the arguments, I just want to mention the general format of our arguments and how they're going to be presented. So the general. So what we're going to do is that on one side, we have certain divine attributes proven through the intellect. So that's one part of our argument. The second part of our argument would be some human needs and qualities that we know intellectually or through experience. Again, I'm not using Quran or Hadith or transmitted sources. So the first part, divine attributes, are intellectually established. The second part, human needs.
Human needs that we feel that we have, then we can see
needs.
that,
either you can see it through your experience, go out in the society and lives of people, you'll see these needs. They're there. Or we'll use our intellect again to understand the human being and his needs. So these two. And in some places of our argument, a third element would come, and that's parts of authentic history. Okay. So we mentioned this, right, that in our discussion on the tools, that authentic history, we are not using it as an independent tool, but it comes as a helper. For example, it came as a context for some of the verses of the Quran. So that's authentic history. Here also, in our arguments, in some places,
it provides some detailed information that helps complete
the thing. That certain thing happened at the time of the Holy Prophet, and authentic history tells us, if you put that thing with human needs and with divine attributes, combine these two together, you can derive a certain qat'i conclusion. So this is also important, that these arguments are qat'i in nature, that these three things combined together necessarily give us a conclusion that you need this individual called the Imam with a certain attributes. Of course, we won't establish all the attributes, and this is the limitation of the intellect, and we are okay with that. We're not saying that we'll use intellect to prove every single quality of the Imam.
The intellect can't do many of these things anyways.
But it's a very important tool to open the way for us, to set the tone and set the stage, and then the details will be completed by the Quran, by the Hadith, and they all fit in so well. So it's like these sources, intellect and the transmitted sources, helping each other to give us a complete and accurate picture of reality. And we'll see that in action in our arguments on Imamah today according to the intellect, and then the discussion will move on to the Quran and the Hadith, and then the other details that are there.
Okay. So let's get started with the first argument, inshallah. So how would you go about that?
Okay, so the first argument, I'm going to give it a name so we can refer to it. And I want this key word and this key phrase to stick in our minds because the argument is centered around this idea. So the name of this argument, of course, it's a name I'm giving. It's like, don't search for this name outside. We're just giving it a name for our own reference. So he said, this is an argument based on the need for divine guidance.
I'm already starting to form questions right now.
So what I'll try to do is that let's divide it into two steps. So even I'm happy and you're happy with that. I'll present the argument with all the different parts and details, and then we can go through the questions that would be there. So I'll quickly put together a lot of intellectual premises. So that's how an argument is, right? So my intellect will establish, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And then based on these,
I'm going to combine and going to come to a conclusion. So let me start mentioning those things. So one of the things that you're going to use is some of the attributes of God. And that's important. And these attributes are proven intellectually. Again, you can pursue this discussion. We also have a course on understanding Tawheed and understanding attributes of Allah, proving His existence. And there you will see that these attributes are established using the intellect. So what are the attributes that you'll use in our discussion on the need for divine guidance? So we have this idea that God is wise. Okay? God also has this attribute of being the guide. He's supposed to guide the people. He also has this attribute of having infinite grace. and infinite mercy. He's trying to maximize perfection and lead us to this idea of absolute perfection. So remember these attributes. I'm going to now bring them in a form of argument. I'm just setting this tone. I want you to imagine these attributes that, okay, the God we are talking about has these attributes.
Yeah. Okay. So he's Al-Hakim, he's perfectly wise, he's Al-Hadi, he's the guide, and he has this infinite mercy, which would necessitate that where, as much as possible, he will help human beings maximize their perfection.
Okay. So keep this in mind. Let me even add now some human qualities and needs. And these are important discussions, right? So for example, when it comes to the human being and his reality and his needs, you would say that human beings have a higher purpose. The purpose of our creation is to get closer to Allah, to reach our perfection, get closer to that absolute perfect being. Again, this is not the place to establish these intellectually. We can do that.
Yeah.
And
these are though I do think that some of these are quite established in our minds anyway. So you can refer back to that information that you have, or you can even, if you'd like, you can go into the details that look, intellectually I can establish that I have a goal. There's a purpose behind my creation. Okay. So that's one Otherwise
thing.
We'll have to go back and start proving God's existence and his attributes. We don't want to go all the way back. We've got a few premises established.
Works, right? That you build this chain of information. So you start from existence of God, his attributes, then connection of God with me. He's my creator. He did not create. His wisdom necessitates that he's created me with a purpose. What's that purpose? I can work that out. I'll add to this that our tools of knowledge, the ones that we have inside us, so basically the five senses and the intellect, are limited, and they cannot work out all the details of our path to perfection. So this is an important thing for us to note, especially for the matters related to soul and the hereafter. Because see, my soul is not a physical entity. And how my actions shape my soul, I generally know, based on my intellect, that when I perform actions, I'm shaping my soul. But individual actions, how do they shape my soul is not clear to me. Neither can my intellect tell me that, nor five senses can tell me that. So you combine these two things together, that God, out of his wisdom and mercy, has created me with a purpose. He wants me to reach maximum possible perfection that I can reach.
In fact, he has created me for that purpose. I think we need to remember that here the purpose of our lives is that.
The mercy. Is getting the divine mercy. Is
getting that mercy and reaching that full potential and perfection that we are able to get.
On the other side, I don't have so much knowledge inside me with the inbuilt tools that I can chart out that path very precisely to reach that perfection. Combine these two things together, we reach this idea that we need divine guidance.
Okay.
So that's my conclusion, number one. I'm reaching Imamah, so give me a bit of time. Very quickly I'm reaching. So therefore we come to this idea that we need divine guides. And then you go through the historical facts and the different details that are there. You can come to this place that you had this succession of the prophets and Anbiya were exactly sent to guide people. So and then you reach the Holy Prophet of Islam. So there also you'll establish that he was a prophet, he had a miracle. So miracles are used to establish that this person was a prophet, and then you establish all the details regarding the prophethood of the Holy Prophet of Islam.
So can I just mention one thing, that so the Aql here for now has only told us we need divine guidance. Yeah. But the rooms are open for different ways of divine guidance. Allah could, for example, speak to us directly. Allah could send angels to us, or Allah could send messengers to us. There's different ways. But when we look at the different ways, we find that Allah hasn't spoken to us directly. I haven't had any wahi done to me. And I'm pretty sure.
Even I haven't had such a thing yet.
So we're not getting wahi generally as normal human beings. So it seems, and it seems like, what are the other ways? One way we can think about is that Allah sends other human beings to guide us. And when we look at history, we find that is actually the only way we can find through which Allah would have and has sent divine guidance.
So basically here we are combining that pure intellectual reasoning with our historical experience or with our personal experience. So again, I'm not using transmitted sources. I'm not saying that believe in prophets because Quran says so, Hadith. It's basically still an intellectual pursuit. But I've added my experience and I've added authentic history to it. So we come to this conclusion, and what we say here is that the Holy Prophet of Islam, based on this intellectual argument, he served these two fundamental functions, which I would say are the necessary functions of a Rasul and a Prophet. One is explaining divine guidance, bringing that divine guidance. So, for example, the Holy Prophet brings the divine guidance through the Quran and also through the Sunnah. So we spoke about the Sunnah in the previous session. When it comes to the Holy Prophet of Islam, you have these two things. That is the divine guidance for the people. But he also has another function, and this also we prove intellectually, that he's also responsible for protecting this divine guidance from tampering and from deviation.
And that is necessary specifically for Prophet Muhammad, because this the last message has come from the divine.
It becomes more sensitive and critical.
So there's no new revelation coming in. Right?
So it becomes very important. And again, here I'll just take you back to a bit of history and authentic history. And also it's very easy to understand that, look, divine guidance is such a sensitive matter that there would be people who would try and play with it, try and corrupt it, for whatever reasons, for love of power, for love of shahwat, for love of money. I think we need to even understand the complexity of human society. Sometimes we might be very simplistic that, the Holy Prophet came with guidance, he gave the Quran to the people, everything was...
and the people submitted to it. It was like very easy
going, and everyone was happy, and they said, amazing guidance. No, it's not like that. They're munafiqeen, they're people with... وَفِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَض. They had issues in their hearts. It's a very complex matter. So I'll just read one narration, and it's mentioned in Shia and Sunni sources. Of course, this is not my proof. I'm just showing you that this is how the society at that time looked like. So this is from Amirul Mu'minin. He says that, وَقَدْ قُذِبَ عَلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ عَلَى أَهْدِهِ. So Amirul Mu'minin is saying that when the Holy Prophet was alive and with the people at that same time, lies were being attributed to him. So, Hatta qama khatiban, to an extent that the Holy Prophet went to the masjid and he stood on the mimbar and he says, Ayyuhan nas kad kathurat alayya al-kadhab. That I can see there are many people who are attributing false things to me, because the bad people would do that, right? Because now they attribute false hadiths and they can get their things done. Then he says, فَمَنْ كَذَبَ عَلَيَّ مُتَأَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. That whosoever deliberately attributes false things to me, his place is hellfire. So why did I bring this? That as part of history, again, I'm not pointing to specific instances. Generally, we know that this phenomenon existed, people trying to tamper with the thing. And as the Prophet, he had the duty to protect the guidance from deviation, right? So just delivering the guidance, so it's not basically like a work that a delivery man does. That, look, this is the message I need to give you. I give it to you. I don't care if it's protected, not protected, misunderstood.
What you do with it, that's none of my business.
No, so Prophet has a role of giving the guidance, one, explaining it, third, protecting it. So this you can use for all the prophets, saying that they would have this role. And why do I say intellectually? Because if one of these three goes missing, it means that people don't have access to guidance. If the bad people are going to tamper so much with the guidance that now the access to guidance is gone in a good substantial manner, then the divine wisdom that he wanted to send the guidance would be put into question. So you can use those attributes of God to work out some general things, So I'm not saying specifically. I'm saying generally the Prophet has to protect the guidance. So this I would define as the essential roles of the Prophet. I would add to that two other roles, which you can intellectually say that if not necessary, at least they are very, very desirable and the best possible thing to do. That Prophet has these two roles. So the third role I'll speak about, again, I'm not going into the details, is that he was also responsible for doing tarbiyah of the people, training people. Now this opens up a new intellectual discussion. I'm not going into that. Why? Because I want to come to the discussion Imamah, is that the role of the prophets was not only to deliver the message, but also to take people's hand and take them to the Father. So this idea, Al-Allama Tabatabai discusses it. I won't go into it. He calls it that the role of the prophets was to explain the religion and wal-isali ilal matlub. Not only just give them the blueprint of reaching perfection, give them the blueprint and also take them
there. Yeah.
And you can discuss this. Why? Because this process of spiritual progress is so complex. There's so many challenges there. There's shaitan there. There's so many obstacles there. There's so much precision there that you need a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into
the way you're mentioning it, it makes me feel like, we think Allah to be so far and careless about us that He just throws from far some guidance and be like, go on, deal with it yourself.
Yeah.
And I've put you in the dunya that's going to tempt you. There's shaitan that's going to come and whisper to you. There's your own nafs that's just inclined towards everything that's wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to sit back and throw you some guidance and leave you on your own. No, we don't realize that Allah cares for us, and as much as possible He wants to guide us, and therefore He will even send us somebody as a role model and a person who can hold our hands and take us. It's for us to now take the hand. If we don't want to take the hand, that's then up to us.
Yeah. So I was going to read this specific part of this narration later, because you brought it up, that this idea that, look, Allah is there in His full, with all His attributes and His full force to help us. And He's not just sitting far there, and He really cares for us and He wants to maximize guidance. So this same idea is mentioned by Imam al-Ridha. So there's this dialogue between Fadl ibn Shazan and Imam al-Ridha recorded in our books of Hadith. So where he's explaining this idea, I'll come to this later also. I just read one sentence from this. So he's talking about why do you need an Imam? I'll come to this later. I just want to read one portion. He says, وَمِنْهَا أَنَّا لَا نَجِدُ فِرْقَةً مِنَ الْفِرَقِ وَلَا مِلَّةً مِنَ الْمِنَلِ بَقَوْا وَآشُوا إِلَّا بِقَيِّمٍ وَرَئِيسٍ. So he's talking about this thing that any nation needs a leader, someone who's guiding them. Then I want to refer to it. He says, when Allah sees that there's a need we have, so we're talking about the need to have a spiritual guide, or for example, he is talking about the need to have a political leader, then he says, فَلَمْ يَجُزْ فِي حِكْمَةِ الْحَكِيمِ أن يترك الخلق مما يعلم أنه لا بد لهم من. So he's saying that, look, it doesn't make sense for a wise God to leave the people in a matter where God knows that they need help. It's their need. So again, see, Imam al-Ridha is working out the connection between this attribute of God, that He is a wise God. He has such a close connection to us, and He knows that this is my need. Spiritual guidance in specific matters. I need to go and refer back to a spiritual guide. Someone who can tell me how do I approach this. If it's my need, if God knows it, he says, it doesn't make sense. فَلَمْ يَجُزْ. It's not permissible for Allah. Of course, not imposing. It means that Allah will do this. Yeah. This is the necessary result of His attributes, that He has to send those parts of guidance that we need. So we can even justify this third function of prophethood intellectually, but I'm just don't want to go into all the details. And the fourth function we know the Holy Prophet had was that he was the role model. And again, this also you can intellectually justify, saying that human beings and human society needs role models. Yeah. And this is, okay, we're not going to the discussion, but here I would at least refer you to the Holy Quran, that لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. This you can take from the Quran, but I can even intellectually justify that people need those spiritual pinnacles to see that Why? Because you need someone to look up to.
You need someone
It's
to
a
look up
social
to.
need.
We normally move towards things when we see other people
Yeah, exactly.
have. We can. It gives us hope. It gives us motivation. It also shows us how to go about it. Right. Otherwise, it doesn't seem tangible enough if we just have a theory, but it's not being implemented anywhere. He's
So-
the implementation of that Quran.
So intellectually, what I would say here is that if I'm not able to establish that we definitely need role models, I can at least say that it's a very good thing to do.
Yeah.
It's from Allah's side. If He wants to maximize guidance, it's a very good thing to do that He sends role models.
Yeah.
And you look at the Quran, they were also role models. So anyhow, so I don't want to go
Yeah.
into the
So-
details.
I just want to mention this came to mind right now. I was thinking, well, isn't it even more amazing if Allah just puts all of us on the right path? But then that goes against our free will and the whole purpose of our creation. So when we say Allah maximizes His good, it's always considering the fact that it shouldn't take away the free will from us either.
Exactly.
That's
So all these attributes have to be understood connected to each other.
Yeah.
So yes, divine wisdom means that He maximizes guidance, but not to an extent that it takes away the free will. Why? Because if it takes away the free will, it's not guidance anymore.
Yeah.
It's
just
like
imposing that on us.
and
Yeah.
the Quran also talks about it, that if Allah had will, He would make everyone submissive to the
Yeah,
Prophet.
and it's a good thing. And it's a good thing that Allah puts somebody by force on the right path, and that's angels. So He's already done that.
It's not for us.
Yeah, it's not for. He's already done that.
Yeah.
We have a different role and a different path to take in our creation, basically.
So with all this said, I'm completing the last piece of my argument, coming to Imamah. And this is the nature of the intellectual arguments, right? You're starting from Allah, you're reaching the prophets, you're reaching the Prophet of Islam, you're reaching the function he must play as the Prophet. Now we ask this question: what happens to these four roles after him? This is an important question that comes to our mind. Now, to make things a bit more prominent and clear, I'll mention these. So this question is there, that these four roles are our perpetual need. Okay, we need someone to explain us the divine guidance, to bring to us the divine guidance. We need someone to protect the divine guidance. It can be tampered with, someone to be able to guard it. Okay, someone being the guardian of Sharia, protecting the Sharia. We need people to continue the divine tarbiyah and training, and we also need those top role models. So as a need, if I see, I'll say that these needs are still there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I'll add two historical facts to this to come to this conclusion that after the Holy Prophet, we need this divine guidance to continue, okay, in some form with certain characteristics. So I'll come to that. So what are those two things that I want to add here? One thing is that after the Holy Prophet had 23 years to preach, and his times were conditioned by a lot of wars. He was busy with a lot of things that were going on. He did not get the time and opportunity to preserve the Sharia and make it so established amongst the Muslims that they won't go astray after him. So I'm using words very carefully. So he had these 23 years. He did a lot of tabligh. He gave out the Quran. He gave out a lot of hadith. He explained the guidance to the people. But as we mentioned, just saying guidance in one or two occasions, a piece of guidance, is not enough.
For a particular matter, you mean?
For
right?
a particular matter, I mean. So the Holy Prophet should have some arrangement whereby, or Allah should have some arrangement that this guidance, which, for example, the Holy Prophet gave, is somehow preserved. Somehow it's reached a certain level of, in the society of the Muslims that there's no room for now difference of opinion or people fighting over it. When you look at the history, after the Holy Prophet, very soon after the Holy Prophet,
Immediately after the Holy
Prophet, all the differences started. How should we do wudu? How did the Holy Prophet did wudu? So some matter like this,
as basic as this,
which people would see the Holy Prophet doing it like every single day. But again, we need to imagine properly the historical setting. Today's world was not the world looked like that time. There are no means of communication. The information given out was very fragmented. So it's not the case that every day thousands of people would come and see the Holy Prophet do wudu. No, he would be with a certain companions and they would see him, but it hadn't become a public information that this is how the Holy Prophet used to pray. And how do we know that it hadn't become? The differences that started coming. So leave aside the people with bad intentions and motives who try to corrupt the Sharia, and that will come to protecting the Sharia. But even if, say, those people were not there, this time was not sufficient for the Holy Prophet to spread and preserve the Sharia in a manner that now it's become public knowledge. Everyone has this idea of the right belief and action.
Yeah, so not only was there not enough time to establish really strongly every single thing that he had brought, but can I also say that he didn't have the chance, the opportunity to establish every single thing that needs to be established.
Exactly. So even
a lot of things that there was no opportunity or the chance didn't present itself to talk about those things.
Exactly. So I would add that to this, that he did not even have chance to talk about every single detail. So yeah,
because
we can say
the limitation of the community at that time, right? Their system was very basic. What the Prophet, if we just stick to the general things that the Quran has told us and the basics of what the Prophet has said, in a world today, the complexities of the world today are very different to the simple lifestyle at that time. So clearly the Prophet, if he was here today, I think there would be a lot of more things he would open up.
Exactly.
Right? So the guidance was there, it just wasn't open up.
Yeah. And one historical indication, because here we're using history, is that after the Holy Prophet, you see people in big numbers coming and referring to the ulama, to the scholars and to the imams, asking so many questions. How should I do this? Is it halal? Is it haram? So not only people would come to the A'immah, because the least that our imams were known for at that time was that they were like very top scholars, carriers of the sunnah. You could ask them questions. So people would come to them. People would come to the other fuqaha and ulama of the other sects, and they would ask so many questions. So this we should think, right? If Holy Prophet had explained everything, one. Secondly, that everything he had explained was very clearly established among the people. Why were people asking questions? So
and
this
there's
gives
a lot of new questions coming up, which the fuqaha found the need to do istinbat, which shows that a lot of things were not explicitly said by the Prophet because the opportunity didn't turn up. And to be fair, the Prophet was busy establishing a system, as if, he's establishing the start of a huge movement.
Exactly. So this, I'll just add one more point, is that in addition to all this, answering new questions, preserving what the Holy Prophet had brought, one other important need that rose after the Holy Prophet is explaining the Quran. So this idea that Quran after the Holy Prophet needs someone to do accurate tafsir, who can actually properly explain what is the meaning of these words. And because this didn't happen for the historical reasons, and the Imams, Allah will come to this, that the Imams were supposed to be the explainers, but because of the differences that arose, you see that says so much difference of opinion on a single verse of the Holy Quran. And we are talking about these things that if you don't understand Quran properly, be ready for disaster. And Muslim history has gone through disaster. There was a period where predestination was a dominant belief, and people using verses of Quran to the Jabriyun to establish that we are predestination. And then it also served a political function. So the oppressors would use it to justify their evil actions. So this is needed. Again, my intention is to, in between, I'll just read portions of riwayat that the Imams are also saying the same thing, that look, Imamah is needed for this. So I'll just read this very brief narration from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. So he says, Ya Jabir. So he's talking to Jabir, saying, Inna lil Qur'ani batnan walil batni batnun wallahu dhahrun walil dhahri dhahrun. So he's saying that Quran has a batin and its batin has a batin. It also has a zahir, and its zahir also needs to be understood properly. Okay. Then he says, Ya Jabir laysa shay'un ab'ada min uqul al-rijal min tafsir al-Quran. So saying that if you don't have an explainer of the Quran after the Holy Prophet, then there is a room for people to make mistakes. إن الآية يكون أولها في شيء وآخرها في شيء وَهُوَ كَلَامٌ مُتَّصِلٌ مُتَصَرِّفٌ عَلَى وُجُوهٍ. So Quran can have many, many different meanings. So you would need someone who would give us guidance on how to understand the Quran. So let me summarize this point and say here that although I would emphasize more on preserving the Sharia and also explaining those parts of guidance which were newer questions, and this fact that Holy Prophet did not have time to give all the details, and also all the details that he was able to give, they're not preserved and hadn't become a public knowledge. So
can I open up the situation therefore after the Prophet? The scenario would be this: if we assume there's no such a thing as Imamah from the divine perspective and Allah having appointed, basically straight after the Prophet, the majority of people are depending on a selected number of Sahaba of the Prophet who are there with the Prophet and who are now the source of guidance for the people, because they're the ones who have seen the Prophet, heard from the Prophet. So the scenario would be either Allah has appointed somebody trustworthy to guide the people, explain to them what the Prophet was saying, and open up for them the new things that have come up which the Prophet didn't get the chance to speak about, or the people refer to normal companions of the Prophet, not knowing who's the best, who's not the best, who necessary to refer to, just because they are companions of the Prophet, go to them, get whatever their understanding was, their understanding at a basic human level understanding, which is prone to error or whatever, and rely on that. So these are the two basically scenarios.
So the point you mentioned is also leading us to this idea that this divine guidance needs to continue, and in whatever form it continues, it has to have that divine connection in terms of knowledge. It cannot be based on conjecture. It cannot be based on somehow extending what the Holy Prophet had said and doing qiyas and saying that, okay, the Holy Prophet said this about a certain issue. There's a new issue at hand. The Holy Prophet is not there, so I don't have access to divine knowledge. Yeah. The best I can do is say that, oh, these two topics look similar, so I can guess that probably this also has the same hukm as, and you see that it happened. Some people went after qiyas, and so we're coming to this idea.
We see the need that people had to extract information. That's where istinbat came from. That's where qiyas came from, right? Yeah. Between, if we look at history again, between the Shias, this need for istinbat and qiyas didn't come until way later.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Sunni brothers who did not take Imam Ali as a divine authority, they quickly saw the need that we need to quickly start deriving laws, because what we have is not enough.
Yeah, and that led to the formation of these four madhab of the Ahlul Sunnah, all with different characteristics. So likes of Abu Hanifa going very strongly after qiyas, the others opposing him, and it led to this formation of these four schools with a lot of differences between themselves. Yeah. Because it was a need. It was a need. People had questions.
So this question, can I quickly ask a question here? That what if someone says that the Quran was sufficient? Wasn't the whole purpose of the Quran in the preservation of the Quran meant to guide the people until the end of time?
Okay, so I think we spoke about this briefly in our previous sessions. We were talking about the role of the Quran. So we came to this idea that the Holy Quran is definitely an important piece of guidance, and all of that's there is something that we want to know and want to act upon. But there's an indication in the Holy Quran itself that for the details of the religion, you need an authority outside of the Quran. And therefore we came to this idea of the Prophet being a source of religion. Why? Because one way to answer your question is that if you say that Quran is enough, then you should also say that the words of Prophet also do not have any value in terms of deen, right? Because you'd say the Quran is enough, and everything is there in the Quran, and even what Prophet says is not binding. The most you can say is it's recommended thing.
It's a helping rule.
It's a helping rule. And this will also relate to the discussion on Imamah. So for example, if we show historically and from Hadith with Tawatur that the Holy Prophet said, Man kuntu mawla fa aliyun mawla. So the event of Ghadir and the verses and everything. Now if someone says that this was just a suggestion from the Holy Prophet, it's not a binding thing from Allah through this source called the Holy Prophet of Islam, it's going to make a big difference on how you understand Imamah. So the first point I would say that Quran itself says that you need a divine authority beyond myself. The reasons can be very many. The Quran had to explain a certain amount of guidance. It couldn't explain all the details. It would become too huge. The new questions that were not relevant that time would not make sense for the Quran to talk about things that are going to come 200 years later, 100 years
to
down
mention
the
them
line.
explicitly
To mention
wouldn't
it
make
because
sense.
it will cause confusion to the people. And say, what are you talking about? I mean, it's not relevant to us. So I'm saying I'm not giving all the details, but we generally know, and we spoke about this, that the arrangement Allah has thought about for us is Quran as a major principal core source of guidance, but it's not enough. We need a source outside the Quran, and the least we all agree is being the source is the person of the Holy Prophet, his words, his actions. So when you open the door for a source of guidance beyond the Holy Prophet, so I'm asking, why cannot we have someone beyond that if the need is there?
If the need is there.
So
it
intellectually
doesn't-
we are saying...
So what you're saying that having an Imam doesn't contradict the need that we had for the Quran, because the need for the Quran was... The Quran, whilst it was there, it needed the Prophet with it to explain it anyways. Yeah. So it's not like it's just a Quran. We never have just a Quran. It's always Quran with someone. That someone was a Prophet. Now we're trying to say that after the Prophet, we still needed someone to continue explain. And can I relate it back to the fact that, again, the Quran is text-based. There's room for interpretations, and if there is not a person who has the full knowledge of the Quran without needing to interpret it in a way that human error comes in, because that's, again, the Quran becomes useless if the only interpreters of the Quran may make mistakes in it by interpreting the words of the Quran. Then that goes against the Quran is useless then. So we need somebody who has that deep knowledge and the full understanding of the Quran who can come and explain what those verses mean.
And what I would add to that, so just to make my argument of this need for divine guidance very, very strong and foolproof, I'll add this, that not only it's true for the Quran that after the Holy Prophet, you needed someone who could accurately, and I'll use this word, infallibly do tafsir of the Quran. The same thing holds true for the Sunnah of the Prophet as well. Because look, the Sunnah of the Prophet was there, but people started differing on the Sunnah. They're not able to come to a common understanding, even explaining the Sunnah, that what did the Prophet want? What did the Prophet say? So you have this confusion that there. So on one side, keep in mind, Allah needs to guide us, needs to give us the best from His side in terms of guidance. We need it, and socially there's a problem there. There's confusion. People are getting astray, misguided. You combine these two things, and why was this happening? Because the Muslim society that was established by the Holy Prophet in those 23 years was still in its nascent stages. We should know this. Things were not like everything solidified, everything strong, political system is strong, the educational system is strong, everyone knows their ahkam, everyone needs... It wasn't like that. It's not even today. So if you keep this historical reality that, and this opened room for a lot of tampering with the Sunnah, with the Quran. And I'll just mention a small thing. I think it's a story that we all know, historically recorded. So there's a story of the wow in the Quran. Not the wow, it's the letter wow. So there's a story, you can go and refer to the historical sources, that I'll not mention the name who did it. So one personality in the history of Islam, there's a verse in the Holy Quran that he tried to remove a wow from the verse. And there are people involved there. So there's this problematic personality in Islamic history called Ka'bul Ahbar. So he was responsible, he was trying to tamper with different things. And one of the things that he was responsible and he was part of the thing is to remove this thing. So let me read the verse. It's interesting. So the hero of the story is Abu Zar. So this is the verse. So historically, when you look at the history, after the Holy Prophet, the Muslims faced a lot of problems. So one of the problems that came up very prominently is a group of people, especially those who are in power and authority, they went after dunya and mal and money, and caused a lot of havoc in the Muslim society. So Abu Dhar was present, right? One of the companions. He would fight against it. So wherever he would go and recite this verse. So this is Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 34. He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, inna kathiran min al-ahbari wal-ruhban la ya'kuluna amwal al-nasi bil-batil wa yasudduna an sabilillah. So it's talking about the Jews. It's talking that a good number of their scholars and their religious personalities would eat haram money. It's talking about the Jews. And they would turn people away from path of Allah. So it's talking about Jews. The context is clear. Ruhban and Ahbar is referring to the Jewish scholars. Then he says, وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَهَا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَبَشِّرْهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. There's a wow here. So it talks about the scholars of Bani Israel. This says, and those people who gather wealth and store it and do not do infaq in the way of Allah, give them glad tidings of divine punishment. So he would just go everywhere. He would go visit Sham, recite this verse on the streets. Abu Dhar was a revolutionary of his own time. So now this became problematic, right? Like these people who are eating money, yaknizunas, storing money, eating from Baytul Mal and doing all these things. So this is problematic. He's reciting verses of the Quran against us. So what they did, they removed the wow. They said, okay, how does that help them? It helped them. Because if you remove the wow, this thing, الَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ, now will become attribute of the scholars of Yahud. So the verse would read like, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْأَحْبَارِ وَالرُّهْبَانِ لَيَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ النَّاسِ and يَسُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ. There's no wow. It's not a separate sentence. It's just explaining that those people, those scholars of Yahud, those bad scholars of Yahud, they would store a lot of money and wouldn't give them away. So he said that it's not talking about us. And they would bring this explanation that no, having a lot of money and wealth is good and all that. So I'm just giving an example that look,
people were there to tamper with this.
But forget about misinterpreting its meaning. They're playing with the words. You can imagine the situation, and we have many, many instances where tampering. So we needed someone to protect the religion from tampering, to preserve it, to explain the details. So just to support my thing, and I think I'll stop with this, that I'm finishing my argument.
Yeah.
So my argument ends here. So these two prominent functions, explaining the religion and preserving it, and third, protecting it from tampering, given this fact that the society that the Holy Prophet had established was still in its initial stages, things hadn't stabilized. And historically, you see a lot of problems, differences, the munafiqeen coming and trying to play with the religion. With all this, and what is at stake is Allah's religion. You can combine these two. Add to that people's need to receive that tarbiyah, people's need for role models. Combine all of this baggage together, you come to this qat'i conclusion that you need someone to save the religion.
And when we say stop from tampering, we don't only mean tampering in terms of the wording, right? So that Allah says in the Quran, we are the ones protecting it. For example, one can say that it was protected by the number of huffaz that were there at the time and the qaris of the Quran at the time. So it's not just about protecting the words, it's protecting the meaning of the words.
That's why I read that verse, that tafsirul Quran was an important need there. People were just explaining the Quran any way they like, going left, right, center, contradictory explanation. You need someone to explain. So this argument, and I'll even add the tarbiyah part, that people needed tarbiyah. Just look at the narration of Unwan al-Basri. He's a person who's looking for tarbiyah. So we should know the story. It's very interesting that this person is, I think, 90 years of age. He's visiting Malik ibn Anas for his spiritual guidance. He's going to visiting everything. Then somehow feels that I should even go to Imam Sadiq and get the guidance.
He wasn't a Shia. Right?
He wasn't a Shia. It's like people there are thirsty for tarbiyah. They want to know, how should I approach it? How should I go? He goes to the Imam. Initially, Imam refuses to speak to him. And Ayatollah Tahriri, in his commentary on this on Unwan al-Basri book, is
translated by Shaykh Kazim. So
it was an honor for me to translate this book, and I'd really mention this here, that please do get hold of that book and read it. So here Ayatollah Tahriri explains that why did Imam Sadiq drive Unwan al-Basri away? He drives him away, literally says that, keep going to Anas, I'm a busy man, I'm under surveillance, you'll be in trouble, you come to me. I mean, the government is watching me. Just keep going there. So he explains there that he wanted to enlighten that spark, and he should really feel
bring
the
the
need,
thirst and
bring the
appreciate
thirst.
what Imam Sadiq is going to say.
Appreciate, yeah.
Not come to him just like
Imam
any
just gave
other
him the
spiritual
spiritual
person.
guidance, and he said that, okay, I mean, there's no difference between what he's saying, what the other person is saying.
So we need to be careful here that Imam Sadiq was not moving away from his role of guidance.
Exactly.
This was a way to strengthen the guidance in the heart.
Ayatollah Tahrir explains that this is the best way to guide people. That when you see them that they're not ready completely, you do something, it's like you push them away a bit to bring them even more closer. It's like a spring effect.
Yeah. It's not a method to use everywhere though. Yeah. Imam knows how to deal with each person.
Then, this is the story, right? Unwan goes and he's sad. Saying that, oh, Imam Sadiq, he's the children of... He didn't accept him as Imam. He said, he didn't give me the guidance. He's so sad. He stops going to the dars, the dars of Malik ibn Anas. He goes to Masjidun Nabi. He prays, and he prays to Allah and talks to the Holy Prophet that make heart of Ja'far soft with respect to me. And then Imam opens up, and that beautiful, magnificent narration where he draws out the spiritual guidance and how you approach it. And there's a whole book and a shell, and the translation is also there. So I'm saying that you shouldn't underestimate this role of tarbiyah. People were thirsty. Now you say that Holy Prophet came, he explained to you how you approach spirituality, tarbiyah.
Deal with it, you know.
No, it's not like that. God cares for us more than this. And again, I'm not making this emotional here, right? I'm saying intellectually, merciful God, after the Holy Prophet, would continue the system of tarbiyah in certain manner. So look at this, the need to explain the religion. And also I'll even add the need for role models. Believe me, if the Imams wouldn't be there as being those top upholders of Islamic principles and spirituality, I don't know what would happen.
Even those who didn't accept him as Imams still appreciated their level of taqwa.
Islam is haq, Islam. And they are those those places to watch for that, this is guidance.
Especially at the time of Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq, people from all madhahib were looking up to them, in terms of knowledge, in terms of piety.
Even in terms of his spirituality and that spiritual Imam Zainul Abidin's role. So the famous story of that thing, he comes in the Kaaba and people make way for him. So it's like he had that dominant spiritual presence there. Look, I'm here to tell you that this is deen, this is taqwa, this is spirituality, this is dua, this is connection to Allah. Combine all this together, you reach a certain conclusion, you need an imam. Allah, who that imam is, specifically, who are these people? We'll take help from the Quran, from the Hadith, from authentic history. I'll just end this portion. I think we should stop here with this very... again, I'll refer back to this a lot, and I'll ask my audience to look at it. So this is a discussion between Fadl ibn Shazan and Imam al-Ridha. So Fadl is asking questions to the Imam about Imam. And it's a long khutbah where he explains so many things about Imamah intellectual. So I'll read a very, very brief portion here. It's interesting. So he says that he's explaining why do you need Imam. He says, وَمِنْهَا, and one by one, وَمِنْهَا, one of the reasons says, أَنَّهُ لَوْ لَمْ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ إِمَامًا قَيِّمًا أَمِينًا حَافِظًا مُسْتَوْدَعًا. If Allah did not appoint for people an Imam who establishes the religion for them, who is a safeguarder, he's the Amin Allahi fi arde. So Ziyarat Amin Allah. Assalamu alayka ya Amin Allahi fi arde. He takes that divine message from God and with full trustworthiness he delivers it. Hafidhan, he protects the deen. Mustawda'an. What would happen? Ladarasatil millah. The society would just fall apart. Chaos. وَذَهَبَ الدِّينِ. The religion would be gone. وَغَيِّرَتِ السُّنَنِ. So it's referring to the least it's referring to is the sunnah of the Prophet. It would be changed, and that's what's happening. وَالْأَحْكَامِ وَغَيِّرَتِ السُّنَنِ وَالْأَحْكَامِ. The divine adab and ahkam would be changed. لَزَادَ فِيهِ الْمُبْتَدِئُونَ. Those innovators would add to religion. وَنَكَذَ مِنْهُ الْمُلْحِدُونَ. Some other would reduce from deen. وَشَبَّهُ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And the Muslims would be confused. So this thing that deen needs to be protected. There are people tampering with the deen. And then he says, إِذْ قَدْ وَجَدْنَا الْخَلْقَ مَنْقُوسِينَ مُحْتَاجِينَ غَيْرَ كَامِلِينَ. Look, people are ignorant. People have deficiencies. people don't know so many things. So people are weak. There are these innovators and fabricators trying to change the deen. And in this situation, God says that you sort it out yourself. I sent the Prophet.
So the Prophet,
it's like, Hasbuna kitabullah. It's like, I've given you the deen.
Go to the Quran and understand it the way your limited understanding can understand from the Quran, basically. Your limited
So I'll just
capacity.
end this with this saying that why people are in like trouble. Ma ikhtilafihim. They'll have difference of opinion. Wa ikhtilafi ahwaihim. Their desires, conflicting desires. Wa tashattuti halatihim. People have different states. They can. We can't expect that accuracy from everyone. فَلَوْ لَمْ يَجْعَلْ فِيهَا قَيِّمًا حَافِظًا لِمَا جَاءَ بِهِ الرُّسُلُ الْأَوَّلِ لَفَسَدُوا عَلَى نَحْوِ مَا بَيَّنَّاهُ. So that first Rasul, the Holy Prophet, brought the message, but it needs to be continued. And if the Imam is not there, what the Prophet initially brought as the deen would be changed. There'll be fasad. We wouldn't understand it. وغيرت الشرائع والسنن والأحكام والإيمان وكان في ذلك فساد الخلق أجمعين. Saying that when all of this is going to change, the sunnah of the Prophet is going to be changed, people are going to be confused, what it eventually would lead is fasadul khalq. People are going to go astray. And this is against divine wisdom. He can't let us. So if you combine this together, I think it sets a very strong stage for understanding the discussions that are going to come. Keep this in mind. This is our need. We need divine guidance. We need this help. And my intellect tells me that Allah has to send these people. And now when you go actually look in history, in Quran, in Hadith, that, oh wow, we have these people.
It's there.
It's there. And you look
the Quran
at what
has
they have
pointed towards it. The Prophet has mentioned statements that clearly indicate to it. It's there, basically.
And even when you go and look at the role they played in protecting the deen. So one is that Quran tells us, the Holy Prophet tells us, and even practically you go and look the role that, for example, Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq played in protecting the Sharia. They gave us the ahadith in telling us the way of spirituality. So the teachings that we have from the Ahlul Bayt also tell us that they played this function which intellectually is necessary.
Now we'll have to, inshallah, in the coming sessions, because a question might come up in the minds that, okay, Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq were out there teaching people doing tarbiyah. But a lot of the other Imams were not. A lot of the other Imams were either in prison or under house arrest and in taqiyya. So were they failing their role of Imam, of being an Imam? How are they guiding if they're doing taqiyya? These things will be, inshallah, covered in the next sessions, where we'll look at Imamah from Hadith, but also how it unfolded itself and how the Imams continued their role of Imamah despite all the pressure on them within the best capacity that was possible at that time.
Exactly. So this, I think you mentioned, is a very important thing, that we'll also have to see Imamah showing itself in society with all its complexity. And I'm sure that's something that you will cover in the later sessions. And that would even probably answer a lot of these questions that, if the Imam is in prison, then what happens to divine guidance? So what was his role? And even I would even make the question prominent and say that, okay, if Imam is so important, then why ghaiba? What happens? Exactly. Where it's a complete example of Imam being there, but our access to him and access to his guidance is like
and in fact one would say, look, we're here in academic discussions. Ghaiba is as if Imam is not there. Here we've established Imam has to be there to guide the people. The ghaiba is as if Imam is not there, right?
So how
does that match with this whole purpose of divine guidance? Inshallah, we'll discuss. We have a session on reconciling the ghaiba with the role of the Imam. So that'll be there, inshallah.
But the least we have established intellectually here is that we need Imam, this person, with this very brief characteristics. So I'll say very briefly that he needs to have that access to divine knowledge, where again, he's not just like others, a scholar trying to just give another opinion. That wouldn't sort the difference of opinion.
I mean, that's not a source of guidance. So for those people who say, like, we believe in Imam, but not he doesn't have any divine appointment and divine guidance, knowledge from the divine to give, so we term it as ilm laduni. Then what's the purpose of this man? How is he different to other fuqaha? Why are you even calling him an Imam?
Exactly.
What's that station?
And intellectually, I'm trying to establish that we need a person with this kind of special divine ilm ladunni, whatever you want to term it, whereby we know even that it's accurate, untampered with, and delivered accurately. That brings us to the idea of isma of the Imam. So the same
isma
thing
at
would
least
say-
again,
at
isma
least, yeah,
at
the
least in the
sense
understanding
and
of the
delivering
and the delivering of the
knowledge,
divine
that's
knowledge.
the thing. Beyond that, in isma, in practical life, how you establish that, I think we'll leave that
That's
for
something for another discussion.
discussion.
Yeah.
So I think
Sure.
this prolonged debate. But
Yeah,
I
this
think
prolonged
is
debate, but it
important.
was good that we finished in one chunk. So inshallah, let's take a break and then we can move on to the second argument.
one,
I think.
and the second one, I would keep it brief.
Yeah.
And although we can go in a lot of detail, and I'll just mention a list of other intellectual approaches to Imamah. Of course, we won't even open them up. What do they mean? I'll just give you the titles. Maybe later we can pursue it in another setting.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So let's take a few minutes break, get some water, chai, a bit of snack to get back that energy, and then come back inshallah and finish off this session on discussing Imamah from an intellectual perspective. See you in a few minutes.
ہر میدان میں کہتے ہیں بوذر سلمان اور قمبر حیدر 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 شیر خدا بھی تو ہے وجہ خدا بھی تو ہے تو ہی زبان خالق دست خدا بھی تو ہے نفس نبی تو نفس نبی تو عکس جلی اور تو ہی خدا کا مظہر حیدر 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 علی کا منکر سامنے جب آتا ہے سن کر نام علی کا زندہ وہ مر جاتا ہے اس کے دل میں آگ لگا دیتا ہوں بس یہ کہہ کر حیدر 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 تیری بلندی پر یوں ناز ہے مجھ کو مولا عرش کی سب راہوں کا علم ہے تجھ کو مولا تو ہی ہمارا مولا ہے اور تو ہی ہمارا رہبر حیدر 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 یاد رہے گا سب کو خیبر کا وہ موسم کتنے چہرے اترے تجھ کو ملا جب پرچم مرحب پر جب وار کیا تو آ گیا سب کے لب پر حیدر 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 نیند بھری آنکھوں سے دیکھ رہے تھے تارے دل میں تمنا لے کر جاگ رہے تھے سارے अर्श से तारा बस यही कह के उतरा अली के दर पर, हैदर 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 दार पे मीसम बोले, हैदर के दुश्मन से कैसे निकालोगे तुम इश्क अली का मन से, तुम जो ज़बां काटोगे मेरा खून कहेगा बहकर, हैदर 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 ज़िक्र अली वाजिब है सबको बता देते हैं, कोई जले तो उसको और जला देते हैं, ऐसी शानो करीमा जाओ आज पुकारे मिलकर, हैदर 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 हैदर
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the second portion of the session on Imamah in the light of the intellect. So we had a very interesting discussion, and the first argument to prove that Imamah is a necessity, intellectually it's a necessity. We've discussed that, we had a lengthy discussion, and we took most of the session on that. Shaykh, you mentioned that there is a second argument that you would like to present to maybe add to the arguments. I mean, it doesn't reinforce the first one, I guess, but it adds to the number of arguments for this.
Yeah, and it's not just adding to the number of arguments. What these arguments are leading us to is also the function of the Imam, and the role of the Imam.
Okay. So it's like we're getting new points as well.
So that's why I've chosen this argument specifically, because if you look carefully at the first argument, the primary core of that argument were these three things. One is that continuation of divine guidance, explaining, protecting, preserving it, one. Continuation of divine system of spiritual training and role models. So if you see, I use these three elements in my argument, and if you pay careful attention, these are indications of what function the Imams would serve. So that argument had those three very important points there. So, and that's why I spent a lot of time on that, and later these things would come as the attributes or roles and functions of the Imam. Okay, so this would come later. So building the foundations intellectually. I'm going to use another argument that's going to take us in a completely new setting.
Okay.
So it's not based on the previous one. So it's a new argument, and the reason we are discussing it is going to lead us to a new important point. So let me put together the argument very clearly and very concisely. So the title I'm going to give, so it's good to have these titles in mind, is The Need for Divine Socio-Political Leadership. Okay. So I start again from divine attributes, whereby I say that Allah is the guide. He wants to guide people. His wisdom has required that He create us with the free will, send guidance for us, and then we're supposed to act upon that guidance. So that's something which we discussed previously. I'll add one more thing to this, and that is that for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not sufficient based on His attributes to just send the divine guidance, but also ensure that practically the guidance is implemented. So this is an added thing I'm talking about. So from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's side, it's not just about giving out divine guidance, but also ensuring that this guidance is implemented. Because see, guidance is not words. Guidance is actions. People have to do certain things to reach that goal. And now Allah not only is the guide, but He's also an entity who wants that this guidance is turned into practice. It's plugged in people's lives, and people are acting upon it. So that's another aspect of divine guidance that we want to look into. So on one side, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants everyone to be guided. I'll just emphasize something very important here, is that let me ask you this question, that is Allah happy that amongst billions of people who live today, a small minority like 5 million people are guided and they reach their perfection? Is that
That
fine?
wouldn't be the ideal Allah would want, obviously.
Right. So this is an important point. Sometimes I'm thinking about Allah's guidance for me. Okay, and I might think that, okay, I've got the guidance.
Yeah,
and
because
that's
I'm already there and I already know
there.
it, I feel like, well, it's sorted. Allah's done His job properly.
But these are creation of Allah, these people, even non-Muslims. You think He's just left them? He doesn't want any system of guidance for them? He doesn't want this guidance to come in their life? So from here on, we are going a bit broad into a social and even global perspective. So we want to have a look at a global, practical perspective on divine guidance. So basically, I'm trying to say that God ideally wants to maximize His grace, His mercy, perfection. He would make an arrangement whereby not only is giving out the blueprint for guidance, He'll also make an arrangement to take the people to this divine guidance. And here we come to the idea of the divine system of socio-political leadership, that the leadership of the society should come from the divine source. So that's one thing, but I'm going to establish that. I'm going to add a few more premises to this, and then we'll complete the argument. What are the other things to keep in mind? One, I'm just reading them. I won't explain them a lot. Time is limited. Human society is extremely complex. Leading a human society, political leadership, and then putting those right teachings in the society is an extremely complex affair. You need a lot of knowledge, you need a lot of expertise, and not only knowledge and expertise, you need a lot of piety and taqwa. Yeah. Why? Because this is the place where a lot of desires and shahwa and love of power, greed for power, greed for money comes in.
So can I just open up a bit what you mean by knowledge? You mean knowledge of the human being himself, the reality of the human being, his needs, and then the knowledge of how society works and how people interact with each other, and what would be an ideal society that will help human beings reach their perfection. So all of these things need to be
all
there.
These add to that how to govern and how to do precise, accurate leadership. So even the process of taking the entire society. So there's a difference. So at one time, Imam Sadiq is teaching Unwan Basri as an individual that, look, you as an individual, you go to your perfection by following these teachings. I'm helping you. In another role, Imam Sadiq is supposed to be, and that's what we're claiming, that this is another function of Imamah, a necessary function. God has to appoint a divine political leader who will take charge of the society and say that, look, society needs to be arranged in this manner, the economic system like this, the political system like this, the media system like this, the educational system like this, because these social systems govern people's lives. They have big impact. Let me tell you why you have so many people misguided today, so much corruption, so much different types of corruption.
Sins rampant, people's ideologies are messed up.
Crime, oppression. Why? Because, and people have the fitrah, they know it's wrong. Why? Because just the fitrah is not enough. It's not enough to just tell them what's right and wrong. You need to build those social systems. Society needs to be built.
Because most people are influenced by the power that's pumping information and trends into them, right? Yeah, we're susceptible to this. Yeah. So if we want to be guided, the ideal situation would be that the system is pumping positiveness, is pumping guidance to us, and that will help most of the people in general, to be guided.
Yeah, and so one other premise of our argument would be that political system and other social systems have a deep impact on people's lives. So this, again, we won't go into detail, but I think it's easy to accept. If you go just check the reality in the world, that if the political system is corrupt and it's allowing a certain wrong social system, for example, a very uncontrolled capitalism to rule that country, expect big rich and poor gap. So for example, what you see in the United States, for example. The political system is in a manner that it lets these powerful rich people grow richer and gain more power at the cost of other people being poor. I'm just giving a small example. So put all this together, God wants to maximize guidance at a social and global level, wants to take people to that destination. In reaching that destination, social systems and particularly the political system plays a key, irreplaceable role. Keeping all this in mind, we come to this conclusion that we need divinely appointed socio-political leadership. This is a conclusion that
we have
draw.
a hadith, right, that says an-nasu ala dini mulukihim.
Exactly.
So this is how much political leaders have an impact in the minds, because they're the ones who decide and filter what's being given to the society from the media. In terms of the systems that are established, they're in control of all this.
Yeah. So again, I wouldn't have time. So otherwise, I mean, the same book I referred to, there's so many narrations talking about effect of the political leaders on people. So the same thing you read, an-nasu bi umara'ihim ashbahu minhum bi abaihim. It's like saying that people resemble their leaders, their umara, more than they resemble their fathers. What is it saying? That
the father's role was the role of tarbiyah,
inside family, saying that tarbiyah cannot be complete. Just you said that will fix the family system and that's it, and you let your social system, the political system, be corrupt and say that in such a corrupt social system, I'm going to build a family that's going to be safe from all the negative influence. It doesn't work like that. And with today's globalized world, it's easy to feel, right, that negative influence that's coming. Or there's another narration from Amirul Mu'mineen, إِذَا تَغَيَّرَ السُّلْطَانِ تَغَيَّرَ الزَّمَانِ. That if the sultan and the political leader say it, that time, the destiny of that period is defined by that. And there's so many. Dawlatul akabir min afdalil maganim. Dawlatul li'am madallatul kiram. That if good people rule, it brings respect and karama for humanity. And if the bad people rule, it puts people in disgrace. So, I mean, there's so many narrations, I won't go a lot of into that. So, basically, I have put forward my argument. So, the argument is that socio-political leadership is a very sensitive issue. It has a lot of impact on people's guidance in real life. God wants that maximum guidance to come out in the society. Put this together. Divinely appointed socio-political leaders who come to establish justice and a good, ideal, virtuous society is a necessity. We need it.
And we have this even in the early times when the oppressors had the government. We find that, for example, Imam Hussein rises and says that the deen of the Prophet is being trampled upon. By who? By the leadership. And that's leading to the deen becoming losing itself, right?
Yeah.
If that leadership continued, the deen would get lost. That's political power. Where has political power go to the religion? Well, it has a big impact to the point that the grandson of the Prophet had to rise at that point. Had he not risen and challenged the political power, the deen would have got.
And this is such an important point, that one of the prominent aspects of Imamah is this idea of the political power, is the socio-political leadership. You look at Ghadir, one of the prominent aspects is this, that he's making him the wali. Wali, one of the meanings, or one of the clear meanings it would have is that, look, the Holy Prophet is saying, I am the leader, I am the waliullah, I am the hakim. All these words are used for the Holy Prophet in the Quran. He's saying, I'm transferring this, giving this leadership to this. The revolution of Imam al-Hussein al-Islam, it's all about that. So the thing you mentioned, it says, Alal Islami as-salam idh kad buliyatil ummatu bira'in mithla Yazid. Saying that, forget Islam. Okay, and again, when we say forget Islam in both ways, they would change Islam as a text and they would not let Islam be implemented in the society. In fact, they would take people away from Islam practically by establishing oppressive social systems. So that's what was happening, right? It was not just the question of Yazid changing the religion. Yes, he was doing that. But in addition to that, people are going astray. He's spreading corruption amongst the people. So this is an important aspect. So my argument actually ends here. So although it would be good to speak with a lot of detail, historical examples, current examples, go through each of these sentences carefully, but it's very clear.
So if we can wrap it up in terms of summarizing how this involves the Imam. So basically, society, human beings have a need, the need for guidance, okay? And being in society, the human being is very susceptible to misguidance, to corruption, and so on. And therefore, society needs a leadership that will facilitate and bring in the what do you call it, the grounds for people to progress and to reach their perfection. Now, for such a system to come up, you need the laws of Allah to be implemented. So you need a ruler who is familiar with the laws of Allah properly, who has the taqwa and all that to stop himself from putting his own laws in the middle for his own benefit. But that ruler should also have a very good understanding of how human being works and his needs, and also how humans interact in the dynamics of society. All this knowledge needs to be there for society to facilitate human perfection. Allah wants to maximize this. Who is the person who would definitely be the right person to do this? As a default position, it would be somebody appointed by Allah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what if we say that, well, Allah chose not to appoint someone for this role. He decided that it's fine for somebody for a fallible person to come, and based on whatever guidance is available from Allah, using that, implement. And then there will be mistakes, of course, but that's the best scenario possible.
Okay. So I'll give two answers to that. One is that such an arrangement from Allah, who's trying to maximize perfection, who's trying to give the best guidance to the people, of course, without compromising their free will, from such a God who is absolutely perfect, absolutely merciful, absolute grace of His is going to come out, such an arrangement is illogical. That when He can appoint a person who, for example, has divine knowledge to rule and a level of isma in him, in delivering the message, in understanding, and also in his personal life, he won't make mistakes in these important social decisions.
And he has that knowledge as well.
Yeah. Then I would say that this idea of maximizing divine grace, that it's expressed in many different ways. So you go and read the book. So sometimes it's expressed in this thing called the principle of divine grace, Qa'idatul Lutf, that Allah's grace has to be maximized. Or it's expressed in another format. It's said that the idea of Nidhamul Ahsan, that Allah gives people the best possible, the Ahsan system. So if you have these attributes of Allah, you would come to this conclusion that He would definitely make the best possible arrangement. That's one answer. The second answer I give is that I think we are a bit downplaying and not understanding the sensitivity of this matter. That you say that you just give it to a person, or for example, let the Muslims decide themselves who's going to lead, for example. Or you just work out some arrangement, we know the blueprint to guidance, we'll just sort it out ourselves. I think we are not appreciating the sensitivity of matter. And I think one of the things that we need to go is look at experience. That you tell me, God sent the divine guidance, and for a variety of reasons, these divine leaders were not able to take charge of the government. We have very few places where these divinely appointed leaders were actually leading the society. You tell me what happened. Okay, you go and look at just the Islamic history. So that's why we emphasize so much on Imamah, right? That we say that it was the right of Amirul Mu'mineen to lead the society. He's the leader of the government. Why do we say so? Why? Because look at what happened after that. Look at the corruption that came in the society. Look at the amount of killings that happened in the society. Look at the facade that spread there. I don't have time to explain. There's moral corruption. There's violence against people.
And we can see that at the time of the Prophet, a lot of these things were contained because people all looked up to the Prophet. He was able to contain it. Although we know there were munafiqeen out there and so on, but the Prophet was able to contain it. But once there was argument in the leadership and the leadership changed, then now those who wanted to bring corruption in the society were freer to do so, and the leadership was not able to contain that because of the lack of, I guess, the necessary knowledge. We're not, again, the khulafa, the discussions on the side, whoever they were and whatever they were, they did not have the sufficient qualification to contain a society that is supposed to run under the guidance and the laws of Allah.
Exactly. So I think this would have to be explained very well. We're not going into it, but I'm just trying to say this, that given how sensitive the matter is, it's a question of guidance of millions of people at stake. It's even a question of lives of millions of people at stake, because if you have an oppressive ruler and an oppressive political system, it can go and just kill people. Historically, we have seen in contemporary times. I mean, you can just look at the examples we have. War in Vietnam, more than 1 million people killed. In what manner? Now, who's going to be responsible for it? Can we say that God has left us saying that I gave you the blueprint and that's it? Who's your political leader? I'm not going to have any say. Again, we're approaching it intellectually.
Yeah.
You go in the Quran, you go in the Hadith, it's absolutely clear that this idea of wilaya and leadership and hukuma, Quran emphasizes on it every single, like you can go and see the traces of it everywhere in the Quran. So that's separate. I'm just saying even intellectually it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't match with divine attributes and the sensitivity of the matter that God leaves us without a political leader.
Can I just mention that again, when the question comes out, okay, what about today then? We don't have the Imam present. Again, this is something that we'll discuss in the coming session on reconciling ghaiba with the role of the Imam, because this is one of the roles of the Imam. Okay, so then what's Allah's plan in the ghaiba? That inshallah we'll talk then.
And this would be the logical approach to take, right? So what we are doing is that based on intellectual foundations and on the Quran would establish that we need Imamah, the institution of Imamah. These are the Imams. This is the function they played. That would be established beyond any doubt. With that established, you have this question. Okay, then what about ghaiba? We will discuss that there. So we are building step by step that when you establish something conclusively, that look, Imamah was needed and it was put in place by God. So we combine all the things together. Now, when that's conclusively established, if you have something, a phenomenon which seems to go against this, we should go and look for solutions and answers and see how these two match. I'll just end, my time is up. So the same idea that you brought up, that why not just give it to the people and they'll sort it out, the political leadership. We just passed through the Ayyam Fatimiyya, right? And we remember Bibi Zahra Salamullah Alayha and the pains and the struggles that she went through that ultimately led to her martyrdom. We should also think and ask this question, what was she fighting for? It's an important question, right? Why so much sacrifice? She gave her everything, right, for this thing. We might say, okay, it was the question of, for example,
Fadak. She was fighting
you
for
start
a piece of
from,
land.
Piece of land. You go a step further, so that, okay, it was the right of Amirul Mu'mineen to be the divine guide, the explainer of religion, the mufassir of the Quran. That's also valid. But when you look at her own words, and I would say this, that when we remember Hazrat Zahra Salamullah Alayha, and we should also remember her words and what her struggle. I'll just read one small thing. So this is her last khutbah. And she's speaking to the women of Ansar, probably maybe a few days before her martyrdom. We don't know the exact date. This is the last khutbah recorded from her. What is she concerned about? What is she saying? That what has happened? Why? Something very big has happened. So I'll just read one small portion. I would really recommend my audience to go and look at this entire khutbah, part of it. So she says that I tried my best to fight for the wilayah of Amirul Mu'mineen, and it hasn't happened. I can see it. I tried, I gave my everything.
But people were not ready to accept it. That's important.
She did
Allah gave His guidance. Allah put
guidance.
the guidance there. People decided not to take it. It's like somebody says, okay, here's the Quran. It's like, no, I don't want to refer to the Quran. It's like that. Yeah. Allah put Imam Ali in that position. People did not want to take it.
This is the part of the khutbah. She says that this has happened. I am going to now predict the future for you. Okay. Amirul Mu'mineen did not get that socio-political leadership, and also he was denied the other roles as the explainer of the religion, as the source of authority. Even that happened. But her socio-political position was also compromised. He did not get that position. So she says, وَاتْمَئِنُّ لِلْفِتْنَةِ جَاشًا. Be certain that this ummah now is going to enter a stage of fitna. There will be confusion. Okay. Not that. She says, وَأَبْشِرُوا بِسَيْفٍ صَارٍ. I give you glad tidings of a sharp sword. وَسَطْوَةِ مُؤْتَدٍ غَاشِمٍ. I'm giving you glad tidings of oppressors coming and taking over. وَبِحَرْجٍ شَامِلٍ. There'll be chaos. Why? Because socio-politically is sensitive. People's guidance. There are people with a lot of love of the world will take this. وَاسْتِبْدَادِ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. This is Hazrat Zahra speaking about future of what's going to happen.
And we're not talking about her using, let's say, ilmul ghaib. She's literally predicting based on natural circumstances.
I said this is an intellectual argument.
Yeah, if you understand how human society works, and you understand what leadership can do and the wrong leadership can do, this is very predictable by any normal.
And it's very beautiful. She says, يَدَأُ فَيْأَكُمْ زَهِيدًا. The same oppressors would come and take away your money. your halal income, they'll take away from you. وَفَيْأَكُمْ زَهِيدًا يَدَأُ فَيْأَكُمْ زَهِيدًا وَجَمْأَكُمْ حَسِيدًا. You know, hasid is like you have crops, you take a sword and you slash it. Okay. She's giving an example that they're going to take your money and your souls. They're going to
uproot you, basically.
Yeah, it's like they're going to think. Then she says, فَيَا حَسْرَةً لَكُمْ. She's saying that, how sad do I feel? وَإِنِّي بِكُمْ. I'm here in front of you. I'm trying to tell you, but you don't understand. وَقَدْ عَمِيَتْ. She said that it seems that people have gone blind. Then she ends with this verse of the Quran. She says, فَقَدْ عَمِيَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ. It's as if everyone has turned blind. Baba, Amirul Mu'mineen, the best person to lead. He's the Imam. He's supposed to continue this mission, but it's not there. Then she reads this verse. She says, أَنُلْزِمُكُمُوهَا وَأَنْتُمْ لَهَا كَارِهُونَ. It's a verse of the Quran. That, can I force you when you don't want to accept it? So this will be also part of answer to a lot of questions. That, yes, from Allah's side, the guidance is complete. Hazrat Zahra is giving her life. Imam Hussain is giving her life for that wilayah that's there. It's very important for them. They're given their everything for this. But أَنُلْزِمُكُمُوهَا. Can we impose on you something? The guidance? وَأَنْتُمْ لَهَا كَارِهُونَ. You don't want to accept it. So I think we'll end here. And again, we want to keep it very intellectual, and saying that although there's a lot of emotions attached to this question of wilayah, and it's good as well, but even you keep those emotions aside, it's very logical. It's 2 + 2 4 that political leadership, people's guidance, wrong people coming and taking over, sensitivity of the matter, millions of people, their lives at stake. God wants to help us, give us the entire guidance. All of this taken together gives you that qat'i certain conclusion. You need a divine political social leader, and these are the Imams. And this brings us to this another aspect of Imamah. Their function as the socio-political leaders, they are the Imams. I mean, Imams in that complete sense. Of course, not forgetting the other roles that we spoke about. So I think this summarizes our discussion, and we have tried and mentioned the most important points. I'll just end with saying that it doesn't end here. And of course, I'm not going. There are many other approaches to saying that Imams must be there from an intellectual perspective. So there's an argument based on divine grace, that Imam is that maximum divine grace. There's a discussion based on this entire creation has that ultimate purpose, and one part of that ultimate purpose is that insan kamil, that perfect human being. Imams are the perfect human. There's another approach whereby you talk about Allah being the true wali, and he is having the true wilayah. His wilayah should have a madhar. It should have a manifestation. Imam is the manifestation of wilayah. I'm saying there's more to Imamah than just what you have discussed. We chose these 2 arguments so that we can just the most relatable, and I'm sure the premises that were used are defendable. You can intellectually defend them. So I think
thank you so much. It was really interesting discussion.
Beyond the time.
It's a very interesting discussion. Thank you very much. And this will set also the start of this now research on the more details. Okay, so now from an intellectual perspective, we've established that Allah ideally should give us a form of divine guidance and leadership after the Prophet of people who have similar attributes to the Prophet, because they have to perform a very similar role and function. And so this takes us to now going to the Quran and see what does the Quran have to say about Imamah, and then later we're going to see what the Prophet and Imams have said about Imamah and their role. And inshallah, then we'll connect it to Ghaiba. We had a few discussions over here. If the brothers and sisters are interested to know more about some of the other topics, we have a few other courses. There's a course on divine guidance on the online learning platform. where Shaykh Kazim has opened up the role of the prophets and his attributes, and this would sort of link and connect to Imamah. There's also a course on the levels of Tawheed, where we're discussing different levels of Tawheed, one of them being the Tawheed in the Walayat al-Shari'iyah of Allah. And in there we also discuss this idea of the criteria of a political leader if he's to be a divine leader. So that's something you can refer to as well. Again, I'm referring you to these so that you can complete your understanding. You can go and search for more if you're interested. So, Shaykhna, thank you very much for this discussion.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with my audience, with you.
Alhamdulillah. We're not going to let go of you. We're going to have Shaykh Kazim come back, inshallah, in a few sessions. We'll let him take a break. It's been like 4 sessions with Shaykh Kazim. So he needs to rest a little bit. So we'll have a few more teachers, and then we'll see Shaykh Kazim again later, inshallah. So, dear brothers and sisters, until the next session, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.